Welcome to this latest edition of History Comes Alive, produced by the Newcastle Henry County Public Library. My name is Winnie Logan and I'm the director here at the library, and I would like to just welcome you and ask you to enjoy this documentary on the Great Depression. Thank you to Daryl Radford and the others who are telling us about their experiences during this difficult time in history.
My name is Daryl Radford. I'm a life journalist in Henry County. And you know, when we hear terms about the Great Recession and how sluggish the economy is these days, we really have nothing to complain about when compared to the Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s. And today we're blessed to have folks with us who can tell us exactly how things were during that Great Depression. Sir, can you tell us your name and when you were born and where you're from?
I'm Lloyd Connor. I was born in 1925 and lived in Delaware County.
What are your most vivid memories of that time period that we know now as the Great Depression?
Well, we moved to the farm in 1930, and not long after that, they was talking about people losing their farms, and they passed a law in 1932 that saved a lot of farms. My granddad was about to lose his. They saved it. He finally pulled it out. And things, I remember the neighbor had a sow having pigs and he just knocked them in the head. There's no market for them.
Oh my gosh.
And they had a farm sale down to the neighbors. Dad went down to the sale and he came home. They sold a crib of corn for 2 cents a bushel.
2 cents a bushel.
And things. We never went hungry. We had a garden and had ate chickens in the summer and pigs in the winter time. But we didn't have a variety like you do now. You didn't go to the store every day or every week and things. You lived what you ate, what you raised.
What would you say a typical meal consisted of when you were growing up during that time?
Well, mostly morning you had eggs and gravy and some meat and things. A lot of people never ate fried cucumbers or fried pumpkin blossoms.
Fried what?
Fried cucumbers or fried pumpkin blossoms.
Fried pumpkin blossoms?
Yeah. In the summertime when the pumpkins is blooming, I've eaten many a lunch on fried pumpkin blossoms or fried cucumbers.
I have never heard of fried pumpkin blossoms.
They're real good. You pick them in the morning when they're opened up real big and pinch the bottom off of them, take the center out of them, soak them in salt water, and then noon you flour them and fry them. They make good sandwiches.
A fried pumpkin blossom sandwich.
Yeah.
How often did you have meat?
Well, we raised our meat. Like I say, we had chickens in the summertime, and then you'd butcher pigs in the wintertime. So we had meat. Mom would pickle the side meat down. We had salt pork for breakfast and things. We ate a lot of gravy and things. I can truthfully say I never went hungry during the Depression. But there's a lot of people did that lived in town. They didn't have the facilities. We couldn't sell some of the salt and stuff, but you could eat them.
What was Christmas time like? Can you talk about that for us?
Christmas time, you maybe get a little sack of candy and one little present and things. And you enjoyed the family get together and things. It wasn't a big hullabaloo like they have now.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get a whole tree full of presents.
Now, what kinds of things did your family do to get food on the table? Did they do anything else besides growing their own garden and taking care of animals? Or?
Well, Dad, he did work in the factory and he got laid off, and then He worked on automobiles. He worked on construction. He worked he was a carpenter and things. He done whatever you could find to do. Dad was an all-around mechanic. He built his own first radio set and things, put it together, and things. He run a garage for back whenever he'd take a screwdriver and stick it up against the block and listen. Well, you got number 3 bearing going bad, or
Oh my heavens.
they had bad bearings. You probably don't know what that is.
I have no idea.
And they had shims. When Dad worked on a car, he put me out on the crank and he'd tighten the bearings up till I couldn't turn the crank, and then he'd loosen them up a little bit, and then he'd loosen. He'd go through and set them all, and whenever you got them all, then he'd loosen them up and he'd set them all about the same. Then when you tightened them all up, they usually had to pull to start it. They'd let it run for about 3 or 4 hours, break them in.
Oh my gosh.
But there's been a lot of changes in automobiles.
Absolutely. Now I'm just curious, what was school like and how far did you have to walk to get there?
I didn't have to walk. I had a school bus come by and picked it up.
Can you describe the school bus? Was it a horse-drawn thing, or was
No.
it motorized? Or?
The first year we moved on the farm, my sister was going to school. She's in the 5th grade and things, and I went to school the last day of school with her. The bus driver would reach up and pull a cord and open the door in the back.
In the back?
And you're in the back of the bus, and you get on from the back. You set along the sides. I went to school with her on the last day, and next fall, they had new school buses. You got on at the front and set along the sides. But I never will forget that, him pull that rope and open the back door for the kids to get on.
And now that's something I've never heard of. Never heard of getting on in the back of the bus. It gives new meaning to back of the bus riding, doesn't it?
Well,
When was the first time you remember going out to eat at a restaurant?
I don't remember when the first time. I can remember the first time we went to a show, and Dad across the street, taking us across the street, and some guy went to turn. He'd about hit us, and Dad gave him a chewing.
Was that in Newcastle, or where was that at?
Muncie.
Muncie? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What about your first memory of electricity?
It was coming about 1936. Congress passed a law. Electric companies didn't want to bring electricity through the country. But they passed a law they had to run electricity through, and you had to pay sign up for so much a month for a year's time. I think it was $5 a month back then. You had to pay whether you use it or not. And there was the biggest boom to the light companies ever does. Of course, they put the electricity through the country, the farmers begin to buy stuff and use it.
Mm-hmm.
I never will forget the first electric stove Mom had and things. She kept burning stuff up.
Oh my gosh.
She could leave it on and you get it up too hot. And
Mm-hmm. Was anybody in your family afraid of electricity?
no, you didn't have a lot of lights. You had a light hanging in the middle of the room and things. And you didn't have a lot of plug-ins. You had the basics. I remember the battery radio operator. You didn't play them all day. You turn them on to get the news, and then you shut them off.
You wanted to save that battery power, didn't you?
My dad
Yeah.
built his. He built his first radio set.
Describe the clothes that you wore back then.
Blue jeans.
Blue jeans.
You had blue jeans you wore to school, You come home, you took them off and put on the ones you wore around the house or out on the farm. And that's about all you wore was blue overalls and blue jeans.
What about wintertime? How were winters back then, and how did you keep warm?
Wood stove. When I got a little bigger, Mom and I, cause Dad had saw a tree down and drag it up with the horses and we'd cut it up. Every night we had to saw enough wood to last the next day, and then I still remember dragging that crosscut back and forth.
Oh my.
And
Sounds like hard work.
had to split it up. You earned your heat. You got warm twice.
You got warm while you were doing it, and then warm after
when you burn it.
Yeah.
You had to clean the firebox out every day to get the ashes out of the ash pit.
When do you remember things getting better?
Well, it started getting better about 1934, 35, but and things. Whenever they got electricity through the country, stuff started picking up. But like I said, that crib of corn sold 2 cents a bushel, and a week later, corn was selling for 5 cents a bushel at the elevator.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, sir, I've appreciated your comments. Thank you. Thank you very
You're
much.
entirely welcome.
As we continue our discussion on the Great Depression, I'm here with another fine young gentleman. Sir, can you tell us your name and where you're from and what year you were born?
My name is James Garvin. I like to be called Jim. I was born here in Henry County in 1930, and that's about it.
When we talk about the era of the Great Depression, what are some of the memories you have of that time period?
Well, I think I listened to stories about people starving, and I never had that problem. We always had food on the table. We always had a big garden. My father hunted for game. We had chicken once a week, hamburger once a week, and we had a big garden. My mother was always canning something, green beans and tomatoes. We always had a lot of tomatoes. I can remember sitting in my backyard getting a bunch of tomatoes and just sitting there with a salt shaker and eating tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't even bother wiping them off.
Just right out of the garden.
Right out of the garden.
Uh-huh.
So that's some of my memories. We always had clean clothes to go to school. I had to walk about a mile to school, but in grade school we had lunches. In high school I came home for lunch and I would run that mile.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'd go right through the middle of town. From the high school to clear down on North Main Street.
What was Christmas like for you during that time period?
We always had toys. I remember we got a little red wagon one year, and Red Ryder BB gun. I remember my brother switching toys on me. It was something he liked best, but he would take it. But we always had fruit and nuts and things in the socks hanging someplace. I always remember shopping with my dad for my mother. And Wegmans store downtown was no longer there.
What are some other memories of downtown Newcastle at that point in time?
There was always a lot of traffic. People parked on the streets. It was, and they would walk the streets, meet people they knew, and yak and yak. It was always crowded, especially on Saturdays. So that's the part I remember.
When was the first time you remember going out to eat anywhere, or did you go out to eat?
We didn't go out to eat. We'd go to my grandmother's maybe, but we never ate in a restaurant. I think the first time I ever had steak was when I was in high school.
Did you guys have electricity?
Yes, as far as I can remember back, we had electricity.
What about your clothes? What kind of clothes did you wear back then? Was it blue jeans or
Knickers,
knickers?
knickers, and boots. My mother usually got all of our clothing from Sears catalog,
Uh-huh.
and but that's what I remember most was the knickers. I didn't care for them too much.
The Sears catalog, that was a pretty popular thing back then, wasn't it?
It was in our family, yeah.
I guess that's the precursor to Amazon.com.
I suppose it is.
When did things start getting better for your family?
Well, I think in the late 30s, I think my dad was getting a little more work, and
What did he do?
he worked at Chrysler.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you said that before. Chrysler?
Uh-huh. And he usually he'd work 3 or 4 months and get laid off for 3 or 4 months, and then but he had to budget pretty much so that we had everything. Like I say, we never went hungry. We always had plenty of food, and adequate clothing.
We're here now with a man who's affectionately known as the mayor of Mount Summit, Tom Smith. Tom, can you tell us where you were from and what year you were born?
I was born in 1927, and I was born in Jasper County in the southwest corner of the state of Missouri in a town called Webb City.
What are your most vivid memories of the Depression era?
Poor. I'm the 8th child out of 10, the 5th son out of 7, and we lived out in the country. We had absolutely nothing.
How did you get by?
Dad had a huge garden. We had an onion patch twice as big as this room, and that didn't last all winter. We grew our own potatoes. My mother canned everything she could lay her hands on, tame or wild. And my mother too was a very good cook, and she could make something out of nothing. Wood burning stoves, and it was our chores to make sure we had plenty of kindling and wood to burn.
What was it like growing up in a big family at that point in time?
Well, we watched out for one another. The older child took care of the next child, and that child, as it grew up, took care of the next one. I was changing my brother's diaties when I was a little kid myself. My mother washed on a washboard out on the back porch, boiled clothes in a big boiler, cast iron boiler with a fire under it, summer and winter, and always hung her clothes out on the clothesline. Sometimes they'd get stiffer than a board. She'd bring them in frozen.
Do you remember the typical meal, what it consisted of back in those days?
We had a lot of cornbread and beans, fried potatoes, sliced tomatoes in the summertime. We had greens, wild greens, dandelion greens, fried okra. Sometimes we'd raise a pig and sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we had chickens and sometimes we didn't. Those poor chickens, they didn't live long enough to lay an egg because they got ate before that. And it wouldn't do to fix one chicken. You had to have 2 or 3 because one just didn't go nowhere.
With a family of, what, there were 8 kids and 10 altogether in the household?
No, there was 10 children, and
10.
Dad and Mom made 12.
Now, how often were you guys able to have meat?
Well, my dad was a meat and potatoes man, but sometimes we couldn't always have meat. I know they got groceries on a credit and paid up once a week, and Mom always done the shopping, and Dad would complain about how much it cost. That went on for a number of years till Mom got tired of it. She says, okay, from now on, you're going to do the grocery shopping. Dad shopped for 1 week and turned it back over to You didn't save a dime. And usually, on a Friday or a Saturday, whenever you got paid, you went to the grocery store to settle up, and they'd give you a sack of candy. Of course, a sack of candy didn't go very far with us, but it helped.
What was Christmas like at the Smith household?
Well, we didn't have much. We'd always have a Christmas tree. We couldn't afford to buy one, so we'd just go out in the fields and get one. And one year we didn't even do that, but it was getting close to Christmas, and my sister and I went out in the pasture and found a dead lamb's quarter stalk that was about 3 or 4 feet tall, and the leaves were all gone on it. We cut that thing down, brought it in the house, and put it on Mom's sewing machine with cotton underneath it, and we made popcorn strings and put on it, and cut up paper and pasted it together and made chains and put on it. And we used tinsel from one year to the next and put the star on top. So we had that. And Dad would always make sure that we had maybe an apple and an orange. And I had an older sister that was able to work, find a job, and she always saw to it that we got at least one present at Christmas time. But the big thing back then was the Christmas meal, which was the star of the year. And if we happened to have company, the old folks ate in the dining room, and we kitchen was regulated to we kids were regulated to the kitchen. And not like it is today, the children are always served first now. Back then it was the elderly people that got served first. The children got fed last.
What was school like, and how far did you have to walk to get there?
Well, the first 4 years I walked about a half a mile one way, and that school got condemned. And then we had to go to another school on the other side of town, and that was about a mile and a half to walk each way. And that same year, that school got condemned, and the WPA finished the new Webster Elementary School, and I got to go there 1 year before we went to high school. And then we walked. We didn't have buses, didn't have a cafeteria, didn't have a parking lot. It was about a mile and a half from home until we moved to town, and it was still about a mile each way. We never did have buses when I was a kid.
Talked about the school lunches. What did you take for lunch?
In a brown paper bag, we usually took maybe a scrambled egg sandwich, or a cheese sandwich, or a bologna sandwich, and a cookie or something, and that was about it.
When was the first time you remember going out to eat?
I don't remember. We didn't have money enough to go out. A nickel went a long ways in those days, but I really don't remember. There weren't all that many restaurants, but every restaurant on their daily menu had chili or meatloaf. They didn't have all this fancy stuff like you got today. There weren't any drive-ins. There wasn't any fast food. If there were ritzy restaurants, I don't know where they were, because we never were able to go to any.
How about your first memory of electricity? Did you guys have electricity?
Nope. We had kerosene lamps, and Dad always read the newspaper or his detective books at night beside the rail lamp, and he wanted us kids to stay quiet while he read, which we did, because on the wall hung Dad's razor strap, and he would use it at times.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I remember one time we didn't have money to get our hair cut, so Dad cut it for us, and it was just like putting a bowl on top of your head and turning it around, and I didn't like it. And I was about 6 years old, and he had a tea towel around me, and I was crying, and he took the razor brush and just stuck it in my mouth with the soap suds and stuff on it, and I didn't cry at getting the haircut anymore.
What about the clothes that you wore?
Overalls, the blue ones mostly, but they also had striped ones, blue and white stripes, and those were rarer, and those were usually used for dress. And I wore overalls to school until I was in the 10th grade. And I told Dad, I said, I am not going to school unless I get a pair of breeches. I got a pair of corduroys, and I really treasured those. Boy, and I wore them out in a year or two, and they were white.
White corduroys.
White corduroys.
What were the winters like, and how did your family keep warm?
Well, we had wood-burning heating stove and wood-burning cook stove, and you had to build a fire every morning, and you had to have paper and kindling wood, and at night we would put a brick on top of the heating stove and heat that thing up and then wrap it up in cloth and take it to bed with us and put it at our feet to keep us warm for a little while. And that helped. Mom never threw away a thing, and all the clothes that we'd wear out, she would cut them up and make comforts out of them. Most people nowadays don't even know what a comfort is, but she would make those and tack them. And she also made her own quilts, embroidered bedspreads and pillowcases. She crocheted, made tablecloths and curtains and bedspreads, and you name it, she'd crochet it. She was busy all the time.
What did you do for entertainment?
Well, like I said, Dad would want us to keep quiet. But if he was out of detective books, and back in those days there were places where you could take 2 books in and trade it for 1. And he was always having us kids take his ones that he had read up there and trade them in and get them back. But if he didn't have anything, us we would sing. Or we would play a game called Button Button, Who's Got the Button? And somebody would get just a loose button out of Mom's button jar and hide it somewhere. And we'd try to find that. Or we would say, I see something red. And then you had to go around and try to figure out what that was. And little silly games like that. But it kept us entertained.
As far as radio goes, did you have a radio?
The first radio we had, one of my older brothers had bought a battery operated radio, and maybe he'd let us listen to it, maybe he wouldn't. But the reason why, it run on battery, and we would use it too much, it'd run out. And we really didn't have much until we moved to town in 1943.
When do you remember things getting a lot better?
When we moved to town, the land our house sat on was owned by a mining company, and they didn't want us there anymore, so we had to move. I think Dad had to pay $12 a year for rent on that ground. It's about 7 acres. Anyway, he found a place at the edge of town that he bought for $650, 5-room house. He paid $10 a month on it, and it had electricity, natural gas, bathroom, hot water heater, bathroom with tub and stool, sidewalks in front of the house. We thought we had died and gone to heaven. One of my older brothers went to the 3C camp and saved some money, and when he got out, he bought Mom a kerosene stove when we were still living in the country. She used that for several years, and then when we moved to town, she had a gas stove. And Dad went up to an appliance store to buy an electric refrigerator, because we'd never had one of those either. And he knew the owner, young man who'd known him all his life, and he wanted to buy it on a credit. And Dad had never bought anything on credit before. Never really needed to, I guess. But anyway, filled out all these papers, and Dad got aggravated with him. And Dad said, to hell with this, I'll just pay you cash. It was about $80. And I don't know where Dad got the money, but he paid him off in cash. But in those days, you just didn't get credit like you do nowadays.
We were also talking about, a lot of people may not, younger people especially, may not realize that refrigeration was kind of a difficult thing back then because you didn't have the electric refrigerators that you had today. Explain that. How did you guys do that to keep things fresh?
Well, we had a wooden ice box, and the top of it had a galvanized tin insert at the top where you put the ice, and you had a sign that you put in the window, and when the ice truck went by, they'd look at that sign and they'd tell you how many pounds you wanted. And as the ice melted, it went down a tube, and you kept a pan down underneath the bottom of it to catch the water. But it didn't last very long. Lots of times we didn't have money to buy the ice with, and your milk was pure milk in those days. And in 2 or 3 days, it'd start getting, or even sooner, it'd get blinky, and then sour, and then clabbered. But Mom always used to make biscuits or something. You never threw it away. But it was hard. We didn't have a spring or anything, so that didn't help us any.
We're here now with another lovely young lady that I've interviewed many times before in my journalism career in Henry County, Eileen McGrady. And Eileen, can you, again, I'm going to have to be rude, I'm going to ask you where you're from and what year you were born.
I've always been in Newcastle, and I was born in 1924.
1924.
So you can do the math. Yeah.
When we talk about the Depression era, what were your memories of growing up during that time period?
I can remember, of course, we lived at Westwood. You know where the country club
Yes.
was? We lived the next road. Dad always had a garden. We always had 2 cows and chickens. So we honestly never went hungry as far as that goes. But I'm sure they worked hard to get it all up there. But I can remember Mom and Dad paid $8 a month for their house. And I was a big deal. I got taken
Yes.
out to mail walks, and that kind of
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
That was a lot of money back then.
That
too,
was a
I'm
lot
sure.
of money.
Yes.
Yeah. They bought it 2 months before I was born and paid it off the day I graduated.
Is that right? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think, what, $2,800 or
Uh-huh,
something?
uh-huh.
Yeah.
You mentioned the garden. Did you have to help in the garden? Was that one of
Yeah,
your-
you cut those potatoes and they had to have an eye in them, remember that? You had to cut them just right, Yeah, I remember that.
What did a typical meal consist of when you were growing up?
Well, as I said, honestly, we were never hungry. Chicken, potatoes, eggs, we had all that. And the cows. And then we had an uncle that had pigs, so he would give us some sausage and that kind of stuff. But don't remember ever going hungry.
Well, when you hear the word depression, you think of poor and depravity and all that. Did you? I mean, is it kind of surreal now to look back and think, gosh, I grew up during that time period, but you didn't really feel like you were poor?
No, because everybody was in the same boat.
Mhm.
I mean, you never had anything, but you never had it to begin with, so
Yeah.
it really didn't make that much
It
difference.
didn't make that much difference.
No.
Uh-huh.
You walked to school, and I never had a bought dress till I was 16.
Oh, is that
Mom
right?
made them.
Tell us about the clothing that you wore and
Of course, you didn't wear slacks then, You just wore dresses. Mom made dresses. As I said, I didn't have a bought one until I was 16.
not until you were 16 years
16
old.
years old. And I can remember to the day, But you just never wore slacks like they do now.
How did your mom make those? Just curious about the sewing machine. Did she have a sewing machine?
Yeah, the pedal
Was it a
kind.
pedal one? Yeah, my
Yeah.
mother had one of those. I
Did you?
think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what Mom had, and she could make it sing,
So it had pedals, and
Yeah.
you manipulated the
And
pedals,
you
and it
turned
spun the wheel.
Yeah, spun the wheels. Yeah, Mom had that for years. She'd do that, and then she took in washings and ironings, for people, and like Tom said, you hung them out on the line and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but you never thought anything about it.
Now, did you get interested in sewing as well as you were growing up?
Yes, I did a lot of sewing. I really did. I enjoyed it, even after we had all the kids. I enjoyed it, but then it sort of faded away. Yeah.
What was Christmas like?
Well, it was great. My dad never saw Santa Claus because he was Santa Claus for Westwood.
Oh, what? Oh, is that right?
Uh-huh.
Is that right? Oh my gosh.
So he never was there when Santa Claus came, you know. And of course, I don't know, I was probably 8 or 9 before I woke up to what was going on, you know. But you only got one toy.
Uh-huh.
You know, you get a doll one year, a baby carriage the next.
Uh-huh.
And like Tom said, you just made your decorations, you didn't buy them. And but I thought it was great.
What kind of decorations do you remember putting on?
Oh, you made them, put your papers together, you know, and strung these cranberries and all this kind of stuff, and toys that you'd made at school, and that kind of stuff.
Now, talking about school, what was that like? Did you walk to school?
Walked to Westwood School. Of course, it's a beautiful school now, but it was just 2 rooms then. You went 4 grades in one and 4 in the other. And the time you got to the 8th grade, you was pretty smart because you could listen, you know, all the way through. But walked to school, never thought a thing about it. Walk home for lunch, you know, and come back.
What's your first memory of electricity? Do you guys have
We had
electricity all the time?
electricity, yeah. But we'd go to my uncle's and they'd have the lamps, you know.
Oh,
But we always had electricity.
What kind of lamps did your uncle have? Was it like kerosene? Or
Yeah, no, gasoline lamps.
Oh, gasoline
Uh-huh,
lamps.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I thought that's a big deal, you know, because we had electricity.
From the wintertime perspective, did you have some rough winters out there? Have trouble keeping warm? Or?
Had a coal stove, of course, but not really, Daryl. You know, you just put on everything you had and took off.
Coal has become kind of a dirty word across at least the political spectrum of America.
It did. It really
But
did.
it was very valuable back in those days.
Back
wasn't
in
it?
there it was. Yeah, I remember every evening after school, I had a little coal bucket, and Harold and I, my brother, would go along the track and pick up the coal that had fallen off of the train.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And
Wow.
that's what we used. Yeah.
That's what you used?
Yeah.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
what we used. Yeah.
What about entertainment? What did you guys do for entertainment? Did you have a radio? Did you?
Yeah, we had a radio. Yeah. But you know, you played outside. I was learning. But anyway, you just rode bicycles and did this kind of stuff. Fought with the neighbors. And, of course, it was all boys, so I really knew how to fight.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'd get in trouble all the time. Okay. But that's what you did. You built your own little wagons or whatever, you know. Yeah.
And when do you remember things getting better?
Probably after, when I became a junior in high school, you know, you could see things getting better at that time. Yeah. And Mom and Dad could too. Dad worked at the Hoosier factory, made cabinets, and then he went for van meters, you know, and things began to really shape up then.
That was quite an era there with the Hoosier Kitchen Cabinets.
Oh my gosh, yes, they're on 14th Street. Yes, it was. And then Van Meter Sawmill was a big deal for Westwood. Yeah.
As we continue our discussion on the Great Depression, welcome this fine gentleman here. Sir, can you tell us your name and where you're from and what year you were born?
Let's see, Robert Fulton, born in 1925 in Newcastle.
What are your most vivid memories of that time period?
I remember I just started school. We lived outside the city limits of Newcastle, out on Hunter Avenue. I remember we had a outside toilet. I remember that. I remember taking baths in the kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
And starting school, we was bused over to Riley School then. And really, that's just about it.
What did a typical meal consist of back in that time period for you?
Mostly I remember biscuits for breakfast. And Dad worked at the Chrysler and he would be laid off quite a bit, and we would run a grocery bill. I can remember walking clear up into town to the store to get groceries, and mainly we just had eggs and bacon and stuff like that, and gravy.
So they would put it on a tab and you'd pay for it as you could. And,
Yes. Usually every week they'd go pay for it.
I'm just curious, where was the store located that you went to?
It was
Remember?
on I remember about 18th and F Avenue,
Uh-huh.
right around in there.
What about Christmas time? What was that like?
Well, usually you would get one gift, and we would hang up our stockings, and we would get candy, fruit in that, and that was about what Christmas was about. If Dad was working,
What are the kinds of things your family did to get food on the table? Did you guys have a garden, or did?
yeah, we had a small garden right next to the house where we planted usually corn and beans and potatoes, and that would help a lot.
Did you work in it as a child? Did you work in the garden?
I remember mostly about the harvest time getting the corn, the beans in and stuff like that. I don't remember I worked in the garden very much.
What was school like for you? Did you have to walk to school?
School bus picked us up and took us to Riley from where we was living on Hunter Avenue.
Your first memory of electricity. Did you guys have electricity?
We didn't have electricity out there at the time. So we used candles and lanterns and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something I think people would have a hard time relating to today. It's kind of hard to read by candlelight, isn't it?
I would think so.
What kinds of things were you able to do in the evening without electricity? Just kind of sit and talk?
Well, quite a bit. I would have some boys in the neighborhood. We'd go out and play around together, get into mischief as we could.
And wintertime, what was winter like?
Well, I can remember bathing in the kitchen in a tub, and it was the weather was very cold out. It was pretty bad,
Yeah.
but we had pretty warm clothes to wear, coats and everything.
And when do you remember things getting better?
I think when we moved into town, it seemed like work got better. We seemed to have more.
Sir, can you tell us your name, where you're from, and what year you were born?
Hal Reinerson is the name. I was born in 1930, and I had lived in Louisville for 52 years, although I'm living here now.
What are your most vivid memories of the Great Depression era?
First time I heard about the Depression was when I studied it in high school, in the history.
So you didn't realize that you'd actually lived through part of it.
No,
Back in those days, what did a typical meal consist of at your family dinner table?
oh, meat and potatoes and a vegetable.
And how often did you have meat? Was that a rare commodity, or were you able to?
We would have it one night a week.
And how did you get it? Did you raise it on your own, or?
No, we bought it.
What was Christmas time like for you?
A present, one or two presents, not a lot like we used to, not like they do now.
And what kinds of things did your family do to get food on the table? Did you guys have a garden, or did you raise animals, or?
I lived till I was 6 years old in Tucson, Arizona, and we had to buy it. And my dad worked. By then, he had a job, and but I can remember my mother, for example, making jelly, and we went from house to house.
What was school like? And did you have to walk to school?
Yeah, we did. We lived in Arizona at the time, and school was a ways, and we walked to school. I remember I went off and played with somebody in the desert, and I got home. My mother just beat the daylights out of me because I could have gotten in trouble in the desert. You didn't mess around in the desert.
Could have gotten lost, or could have gotten.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could. I would say junior high, almost high school. We just didn't go out to eat. You ate at the table, and that was it.
It's interesting that a lot of people are so selective these days when it comes to what they eat. They have very specific appetites that I would imagine back in your day, you couldn't be very choosy, could you?
No.
You ate what was in front of you, or you didn't eat at all?
Yeah, meat and potatoes and a vegetable, that was it. Steak usually, if you had better. Vegetable, potato, yeah, whatever.
What about your first memory of electricity?
We always had electricity as far as I know. 1938 or so, we came back to Indiana and we ran into relatives who got candles, kerosene lamps. That was still in. That was in the late 30s.
And what was your reaction when you encountered that?
I was, what? What is this? And that's the first time that we ran into that.
Something we take for granted today, isn't it?
Yeah. No, we had electricity when in Arizona.
Describe the clothes that you wore back in those days.
Oh, blue jeans, like you said, blue jeans and cheap shirt. That was it.
A lot of patches in the blue jeans? Or?
Some, you know.
What about wintertime? What were they like, and how did you
Well,
keep
Arizona
Of
was,
course, yeah, Arizona's a little different story.
you
isn't it?
didn't worry about the winter at that time. I remember my first episode with snow. For example, we came back and we had a Thanksgiving dinner at my aunt's house right after we got back, and it had snowed, and I went out and played in the snow, and I began to hurt. I didn't realize that snow was that, and it hurt. I never liked snow ever since.
Is that right?
I hated snow.
What did you do for entertainment?
Oh, I played with neighbor kids. We listened to the radio. Yeah, we listened to the radio a lot. I mean, there were programs, comedy programs. We listened to the news. A lot of comedy programs.
Do you remember any of the comedy programs you listened to? What were they? Who were they?
Oh gosh, Jack Benny, Bob Hope, and yeah, we listened to those.
When do you remember things getting better?
In the late 30s, it got better. My dad got a regular job, and I would say in the middle to late 30s, yeah.
Your dad got a better job where at?
Out in Prairie, yeah, in Tucson, at the place that worked on boxcars. But he was a carpenter, and he got back here and he was able to get work.
What was your career? What did you do?
I was a music teacher for 35 years.
Sir, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We're here now with a young lady I've interviewed many times over the years as a journalist and newspaper reporter, Rilla Denton. And Rilla, excuse me for being a little bit forward here, but I'm supposed to ask what year you were born and where you're from. I know it's not polite to ask a lady's age.
Oh, it's no problem. I was a Christmas child, December 25th, 1925, and my great uncle was a doctor who never forgave me for ruining his Christmas dinner. Yeah.
What are your most vivid memories of growing up during the time period around what was known as the Great Depression?
I think girls were probably more protected from everything than the boys were. But I remember Mother telling me that she took my brother to bed to keep him warm because she'd only had green wood to burn. And my father had built the building that still exists on 18th Street. Had 4 apartments upstairs and 2 offices downstairs and then a big garage in the back. And he had a tire and accessory business. And when the Depression hit, the Kentuckians who had come to Newcastle to work at Chrysler went back to Kentucky on Dad's tires.
Is that right? Oh,
But
my
he was a stubborn person and he would not declare bankruptcy. He made everything good and he started his insurance agency, which he had for over 35 years. And he told me that the first year he cleared $200.
As far as your typical meals at that point in time when you were growing up, can you tell us what those consisted of?
My mother was an excellent cook, and we had a lot of game because my dad was a hunter and a fisherman, and I think she cooked everything there ever was, and it was delicious. But yeah, she was a good cook, and I remember her saying one time that she made a lot of biscuits because she had flour, but she didn't have money to buy bread.
I'm just curious about the kinds of meat that you had that ranged from
Rabbit
anything.
and
Yeah.
squirrel, and I even, after my brother was killed, Dad took me hunting with him,
Did he really?
and we went squirrel hunting, and we'd have big squirrel dinners. Yeah, and my grandparents had a farm, and as a matter of fact, both sides of my dad's and my mother's family had farms. So I don't remember doing with that, but like I said, my mother was a wonderful cook.
What was the first time you remember going out to eat?
Probably when I had a date and he took me out to eat. No, there was a restaurant in Cumberland that Mother and Dad liked, and after church on Sunday, would go down there. But I was a teenager by then. I don't remember going out before being a teenager.
What is your first memory of electricity?
We always had electricity.
Always had
Mhm.
electricity. So it was not anything foreign or...
No, I was born 25 and was born in a house in Newcastle, not out on the farm.
What about the clothes that you wore during that time period?
Well, I'm bragging a lot about my mother, but she was also an extra wonderful seamstress, and I always had nice clothes.
What were winters like when you were young, and how did you keep warm?
I was always warm. I had warm clothing, and I didn't have far to go to school. I walked to school. Just playing in the snow. It wasn't a hard life.
How far did you have to walk to school? Was it very far?
Well, I went out our back door, down the alley, crossed a couple of streets, and I was there at Hernley School.
Went to Hernley Elementary School.
Elementary school. But from our house, I could also walk to high school, which was in the old junior high building. No, the old high school.
On 14th Street?
Yeah.
When did things get better, do you think?
I think Dad was successful, and I didn't realize it, but my mother was also doing washings for people.
Was she really?
And I never knew until after I was married that the money she made from washing and ironing was what she used to buy my piano.
Is that right?
It kind of broke my heart to think that she had done all that.
Yeah. And what did you do for entertainment in those days?
Oh, kids wouldn't dream of doing what we did. We played school. We'd take chairs in the kitchen and line them up in a row. Someone would be the teacher. And we also played train. We made tickets out of paper and bought our tickets. And we played train, and we'd all be in a row. But I had good friends that, well, they're all gone now, but we remained friends all these years. Had a good time on 18th Street. We played hopscotch. Stupid things like that. Oh, but the biggest fun was, we lived across the street from Shapiro's grocery store, and he had a vacant lot in back, and there would be big boxes from, I suppose, supplies. And we built houses out of those big boxes, and yeah, we had a lot of.
What fun.
We made our fun.